Okay, so today we have the Nikon FG. This one was their low budget camera. The FM and the FE and the FM2 and the FE2, and certainly the single digit numbers, the F1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 were their pro cameras. This was sort of made for the amateur market looking to buy a camera that they didn't have to carry that much weight and wanted a small camera. It has an all electronic shutters, and it has 2 automatic modes, an A for an aperture priority and a P for program. For the program mode, you have to set the camera at f22, the smallest aperture, so that the camera can make choices based on what it needs to take a picture and have the full range of apertures available to it. So if you use that on P, make sure you have the lens set on 22. If you use it on aperture priority, and there's a little lock here to keep you from moving it out of program until you push this little silver button. Once you're in aperture priority, then you can choose any aperture you want, and the camera will choose the corresponding shutter speed. The build quality of this little lever here is a little bit plasticky. What's it doing? Okay, so that's a quarter of a second. Do you see what's happening? It's up for a lot longer than a quarter of a second. It should be over by now. So when it does that, what that tells me is the battery in this is exhausted. Here's a 2/50th of a second. The mirror is up and the exposure has started, but it hasn't ended. And the only way to get it to come back down is to turn this to M90. This camera has 1 mechanical shutter on it. Just like I said, the battery runs all the shutter speeds. The M90 means the 90th of a second is completely mechanical. So if you have no battery, you can still shoot at 1 shutter speed, a 90th. It sounds like this. And that actually opened and closed. But none of the other shutter speeds work right now because the battery's out. So I would have to put a battery in to test it, and I'll do that. I won't do that in this video, obviously. You set your ISO right over here. It's a little ring you lift up, and you can turn, and that tells the camera what the film speed is. If you're using Sunny 16, you don't need to worry about that. You can just guess exposure. Most of the time, I was just shooting today with a small camera, and I was shooting at a 15th of a second at f1.7. That's a complete guess, but it was a kind of a dark room, and I know that I'll get an image on film with 400 speed film inside at lunch if I shoot at a 15th of a second at 1.7. So again, learn the Sunny 16 rule. It's a highly recommended, easy system that you can use with these old film cameras and still get an image, even when the meter goes out. The problem with this is you're stuck at only 1 shutter speed without a battery, that 90th of a second. Which I don't like being stuck. I'd rather have a camera that has an all mechanical shutter that I can use at any shutter speed, and that the meter only is the only thing run by the battery. When this is working in aperture and priority mode, it's got a little 0 plus minus scale right over here, and that lets you say, I'm going to keep it in automatic, but I'm going to have the camera overexpose or underexpose, and you got to press this little button to make this wheel turn. And so usually you would keep it zeroed out, but if you need to overexpose or underexpose while you're in one of the automatic modes, then you would just push it to -1 or +1. It also has a little beep that gives you warnings and things, and you can turn that off. So I always turn that off. I would never use that. I actually haven't shot a lot with this camera. This is one of the student cameras, and it's got an E lens. They're real small little, tiny little focus ring here. It's like a pancake lens, it's so small. I typically never like these lenses, but I do like how small they made them. And there is something to that. This one doesn't say E on them, but some of them will say Series E right on the lens. That was their economy lens, that's why they named them Series E. I wouldn't have any trouble shooting with this if that's what I had with me. It's decently built. Some of the later, even the new autofocus lenses have plastic back here. This one still has metal, so it's decent quality, but it's certainly more economy than their bigger f2 lenses, and they're full-blown Nikon lenses. Again, check the shutter speeds. I can only shoot at a 90th because, again, if I have no battery in here, this is what a 30th of a second looks like. See, the mirror goes up and the aperture, not the aperture, the shutter opens, but it won't close because there's no battery. So if I put it back to mechanical 90, that's how you can get the shutter to come back and reset. If you're looking at one of these and the person is selling it and says, I don't know why it won't shoot, every time I shoot it just gets stuck, you might be able to test it and see if it goes to M90 and it resets, that just means the battery's out, and you might be able to get it for a little bit less because the owner doesn't even know that the camera works fine, it just doesn't have a battery. Sometimes information is to your advantage when you're negotiating. It has contacts down here, so I'm thinking it takes a small little motor drive. I've never seen this one with a motor drive. There's your battery compartment. There's your tripod socket. It does take a motor drive because there's the little ratchet where the motor turns and advances the film. There's your rewind lever, and we'll look inside of it. Pretty simple. You can see it's a vertical shutter. When the shutter works, it goes from top to bottom, and then it resets coming back up. If I put it at 1/8 of a second, you'll see how that's a problem because the shutter, it won't reset until I go back to a 90th. Oh, bulb also works. Hey, I'm on B right now, and I just learned something. In this camera, in B, the bulb mode works even when there's no battery. So if you were really desperate and you needed to shoot at a slow shutter speed, you might think, well, 1/15 of a second sounds like clop, clop. You might be able to go, if you held the camera still enough, you know, you might be able to actually guess a 1/15 of a second, or a 1/2 a second might be, again, you're guessing, but there is some latitude with film, and that's one of the adventures of film photography, is you get to, you know, work with time. It's a very mechanical medium, and I wouldn't have a problem with, if I was stuck with nothing else, shooting this camera at a 1 second exposure by counting. Let's see. Okay, that seems like about a second. I might have to put it on a table to hold it still, but that would get an exposure. Again, whatever you have to do sometimes, right? But then on a 90th of a second, you can see the way the shutter really looks. Opens and closes. And then if I put the battery in, all the shutter speeds would work. And if they didn't, I wouldn't buy it. And I did have a battery in this, so I know it works, but I don't have one in there right now to show you. Nikon 50mm pancake lens. The whole thing is pretty small, weighs very little, and like I said, I don't like the build quality. It's quite as good as the Nikon FM or the FE or the FM2, FE2, but I do like it better than the EM. If you see that one, we'll have one of those on here soon, and I like it better than that. The EM didn't have any manual shutter speed, so you didn't have any control like the FG had. And it's certainly better than, again, a lot of the Yashicas and some of the cameras that are more of the off-brands, the Konicas and the Petries and the Mirandas. It's better than those. And the lenses are readily available. So if you find one of these for super cheap, like I'd pay $20 at a yard sale and not much more, it's a good camera for that. So let me know if you get one. Put some pictures in a link in the comments below, and if you have any questions, post them and we'll get to them. And thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you would. I'll have more coming up real soon. Happy film shooting. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.